Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this planning public meeting. I'm going to call us to order and note we have regrets from Councillor Forder today, but we do have quorum. And we're going to begin with Councillor Bell reading our land acknowledgement.
Acknowledging that we're meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewa and Nawash unceded First Nation and Chippewas Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis people and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend for these waters.
Thank you, Councillor. And now if you just join me in a moment of silent reflection on today's business. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I just remind you, if it occurs to you, you can bring it forward at that time. So I want to welcome everyone to learn more about a land use planning application applying to certain lands in the municipality of Meaford. It's important to note that the Planning Act requires that persons who may later wish to file an appeal on Council's decision on these matters must either provide verbal comments today at this public meeting or provide written comments to Council before the decision is reached. The intention of this requirement is that only those persons who have taken the time and the care to learn about the proposal and be involved in the planning process have gained the opportunity to appeal a decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Under the Planning Act, Council is legally required to make decisions that conform to the county and local official plans. It is within this legal framework and our guiding policies that we are having this open public meeting to give persons the opportunity to make formal statements about the application before us. Your statements do not have to declare a position on the application being considered and can be focused on specific characteristics if you wish. By making your constructive statements, you are providing the municipality with key insights into the public's perspectives. Council has a variety of legal tools available that can be applied to development to ensure that it addresses potential negative impacts and meets the adopted policies and regulations of the municipality. Those who have pre-registered for today's meeting will have an opportunity to speak remotely or in person. Given the complexity of development applications, you should expect that many of the matters raised during the meeting today will require further research and analysis to be undertaken. However, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond at the end of the meeting if they wish. I'll now call upon today's first public meeting to order. This is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for lands known as 123222 Storybook Road Park in Meaford. This meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out by the Planning Act. Based on the rules of the Act, there must be at least 20 days' notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. Notice of the zoning bylaw amendment was issued on August 21st, 2023, giving the required 20 days' notice. Let's get started. First, I'm going to ask Denise McCarl, Manager of Planning Services, to share a brief description of the application and to provide us with any public and agency comments that have been received to date.
Thank you, Richard. So I'm going to actually try to make this really quick because I think it's actually a very simple application, and the purpose of it is really just to implement the condition that the Committee of Adjustment applied to the provisional consent that they gave to this to the overall proposal several weeks ago. So I'll just go through it briefly, and I apologize if I'm unclear at all because this is actually Meredith Gillespie's application, but it's her birthday today. So I told her there's no point in both of us being here. And I would definitely do this meeting for her, and she's done it for me before for a very similar reason. So I will proceed. So the purpose of the public meeting is, as all our public meetings, it's to hear from the public if they want to speak on this application. It doesn't look like we have a lot of public engagement on this particular application. It certainly doesn't have a particularly large public interest component, but it also provides the ability for the applicant to speak about their proposal and for me to provide some information to the public and to council about what this application is about. So the proposal, and I think it might be really hard for you to see on the screen for council, but maybe on your own screens. If you look, there is a red square, which is outlining a house. And then the green box that's going around a couple of severed lots, along with some vacant lands and farmland, and as well as a parking lot, are the two pieces that we're talking about today. So our application B07 2023 was seeking permission to sever off the house from the rest of the Storybook Park property that is used for, it's really just used for farming and for parking for the Storybook Park facility. And so there was an interest to take the house out of that equation, which makes sense because those are two totally different things. So if you, for example, wanted to sell the house or you wanted to sell Storybook Park facility, you would be stuck with both properties. What that did, though, was it meant that the house itself, that box, is a little bit undersized. So it needs some zoning approval. That could have been done through a minor variance. However, the only way that we could support this proposal overall is to restrict any further residential development on what you're seeing is the green area. So the box in green. This was a cooperation between kind of putting all our heads together between the county and municipal staff and the applicant's planning consultant. So the zoning on this would recognize the size of the lot, the 0.55 hectare parcel as an appropriate size lot because it is undersized in our zoning bylaw, but it really doesn't change anything for how that property would operate for where the house and its functions are. And then it would separate it from the remainder of the lands. So just for context, so I'm sure everyone's pretty familiar with where this property is. It's south of the Storybook Park facility. And it has access to Storybook Park Road. Looks like I went too fast. So to the north is the Storybook Park facility, as I mentioned, and some other vacant areas. There's farming in the south and east and some woodlands south and southwest, which you can kind of see in that aerial photo. So the land use designations in the Grey County official plan are the same as what's in the Meaford official plan, but it's mostly rural with some agricultural lands as well. And in the constraint mapping, there is some significant woodlands there, but there is no impact to those woodlands as part of this application because no additional development is proposed. Another constraint on this is karst potential, but like I said, no developments proposed, so it doesn't impact that karst potential on that yellow area that you're seeing, or it's kind of green there because the blue is overlapping, but. And similarly, there's potential for bedrock, but because no development is proposed, it doesn't impact that constraint. And you can kind of see it's similar. We don't have GIS-based data for our official plan mapping, but so we've used the PDF here, which is a little harder to see, but you can see that the white is the rural and the yellow is the agricultural area. Similarly, the zoning on the property is rural and agriculture, matching the official plan. And you can see the two severed lots. One is agricultural or is zoned rural, and the other one is rural residential. And as this is the aerial photo again with the kind of outline of what's to be severed, and just reiterating that the rezoning would permit that lot to be slightly undersized at 0.55 hectares. And the retained lot would be rezoned to prohibit future residential development as required by the policies. We're treating it similarly to as we would do with a surplus farm dwelling severance, because in this case, maximum lot density had already been reached. But because of the way these properties are used, the county and ourselves were able to support the severance of this house from the remainder of the property. The next steps are for us to continue on with our review. And anything we hear today, it doesn't look like we're going to hear a lot today. And to provide council with a report. And then council can make a decision on that zoning amendment. And then there'd be an appeal period on that decision. So we don't expect to take very long to bring that back. I believe it's coming in a subsequent meeting, so probably in October right away. And because of certainly our advanced timeline that we have. And then I'll just note that we've received one letter, so we haven't had a lot of comments received. We're noticing we're getting fewer and fewer comments from agencies that don't have an interest. They're just not commenting now, whereas before we were getting kind of a letter saying they had no concerns. The county is the one exception. So the County of Grey did write out a full letter saying that they were certainly aware of it and that they had provided more fulsome comments with the severance application and that they had no further concerns. And that's all I have for you today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Denise. I understand that the agent for this application, a member of Questa Planning Consultants, will be speaking on the application and has a presentation. Do we have that party on the line?
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Don Scott here, Questa Planning Consultants. I will be very brief in my comments as Denise has done her usual excellent job. As she indicated, the property is about 50 acres in size. The east half of it contains Mr. Greaves' residence, as well as a bush area and the parking lot for the amusement park on the north side of the road. And the east part is rented and farmed to a local farmer, Mr. Sam Lockhart. Some of you might know him. Basically, the zoning bylaw effectively retains the status quo. And as Denise said, it's very similar to a surplus farm severance that is sanctioned by the provincial policy statement as well as the county and Meaford official plans. And the zoning bylaw then permits the municipality to grant the consent. And it's my opinion that this approach is retaining the status quo is very appropriate for this existing residents in the rural area. And as Denise sort of mentioned, if it wasn't an existing situation, it would be somewhat difficult, if not impossible, to support creating another non-farm residential lot. And I just want to endorse the approach that the staff is taking, and hopefully it will be, the bylaw will be approved by council in the near future. Any questions, just be more than happy to try to respond.
I see none. So thank you, Mr. Scott. Is the applicant present? Did he wish to speak?
And no, Mr. Greaves is not in attendance.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate your help. There's been no pre-registrations to speak in person at this meeting by members of the public, and I see no one in our audience this afternoon. So I would say that we'll move right along. Members of council, any comments or questions on this application? Councillor Uhrig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, less on this actual application. I have no problem with. Denise, you said procedurally there, the last second last statement was really interesting. You said you're receiving less actual acknowledgements from other bodies that might have weigh in on this. Are we getting at least acknowledging receipt that they are aware? The problem with not receiving something, could that ever lead to a, we didn't know about it, you shouldn't be doing that?
Go ahead, Denise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, so two things. Yes, we are getting some acknowledgement. So some of the utilities, for example, are just, we're getting an auto response saying we've received your email. But some of the smaller agencies haven't necessarily responded as much on some of the applications lately, or the responses are getting shorter. So the example would be the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority. Because there's no impact to them in this particular case, they haven't provided a comment at all. They did provide a comment on the severance, but we're noticing, I think the volume is so high now for a lot of the agencies to review that it's getting more brief.
Any other questions or comments from council? Other points from Development Services team?
No, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Scott, did you have any closing remarks for us?
Other than I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm quite familiar with these types of development in the rural areas, and I think this is, as I mentioned before, an appropriate way to handle an existing residence. As a company that does a lot of work in pits and quarries, we don't appreciate rural non-farm severances. They seem to create an immense amount of problems for anybody that's trying to operate or start a pit or quarry. So this, I feel, is an appropriate way to handle this application. It basically doesn't change anything, and it does allow Mr. Grieve to get a deed for his own property that he's been living on for 20 or 30 years. So thanks again for the opportunity to speak, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. In closing then, thank you for attending this meeting and sharing your thoughts on this application. This matter will now be referred back to Development Services staff to follow up on any additional information required from the applicant based on the matters raised today. Once staff are satisfied that they have all necessary information needed to provide a recommendation on the application, a detailed planning report will be brought back to council to assist us in our decision-making. This report will evaluate how the proposal does or does not satisfy the provincial, county, and municipal policies that must be considered as part of council's decision. It will also explore the various public and agency comments received regarding the application, noting those tools which may be applied in order to address any concerns raised and to mitigate potential impacts on nearby properties. If you would like to receive mailed notice of a future decision on this file, please provide your contact information to the Planning Services Division by email. The address is planning@meaford.ca, all lowercase, planning@meaford.ca. And that concludes our meeting this afternoon, and I pronounce it adjourned.